Hey, I'm Sarah at Totally Stitched Craft, and if you want to learn how to make this type of crochet panel, I'm going to show you how to create the graph and the actual chart that I use to make this panel, and to how to read it, how to design it yourself. And then I'm also going to show you how to do the actual method of this type of Intarsia Crochet floating color work method. So if you're into that, if that's something that you want to learn how to do for yourself, stick around and I shall teach you.
I like to create all of my charts using a program online that is free called flosscross.com. It's very easy to use. You just create a pattern using the create pattern button. I've already created the Chrissy wake up pattern here, but I'll go ahead and show you how to make your own. You have 3 slots here. At any time you can delete or erase the slot. So basically it's unlimited. Once you export to PDF, you probably don't need the slot again. I'm going to click the From Image in slot 2 and select my image. Now I already have created a PNG that looks like this, just using like Word. I actually use this doing Canva, and I'm going to hit the Continue button. And then I want my chart width to be 80 and my height to be 80. And then I can go in here after I say continue, and max I want 2 colors, and I'll say continue again and then finish. But now I have this chart here where I can actually come in here and clean this up. So I'm going to pick the white color, and I'm going to start manipulating some of these stitches here so I can actually get to a pattern that I want. And once I do this, then I will have a chart that I can then save to a PDF. So I'll come in here, clean this up, and then show you how to export this image. And yeah, you can basically write whatever you want in here, and it's free. And so next, I'll show you how to export this to your very own PDF, and then we'll learn how to read the chart. Now that I've got my final image here, I want to export this to a PDF. The way that you do that is in the top left corner. I'm going to click these 3 little bars and say export, and then to PDF. Now I get to decide everything that I want in my PDF here. I'm going to go ahead and change the title. Cross stitch chart is fine. Description, we don't need one. Header text, I'm going to remove the PNG. And then I'll write my own copyright here since I made this. Totally Stitch Craft. Pattern symbol size, I like 2.8 millimeters. And then I don't think we need to edit anything else. I'm going to flip on the preview PDF so we can go ahead and take a look of what our PDF will look like when we are done with it. And that's it. We've got the floss list that shows us the colors. We've got that actual chart that we can put together and work from. And then we also have the preview image. And so then I will click Save to PDF and choose my file name, click OK. Since I've already saved this to my computer, I'm not going to go any further here. But I'm going to go ahead and print this off my printer, and then we'll come back into my workspace and I'll show you how to actually start crocheting this.
Now that I've got my graph, I can start creating my actual crochet project. There's a couple of things that I want to do on this graph first. So this is how it came out of the PDF that I downloaded. And you can see on the side here where I've got the numbers from 10 to 80 starting from the top left corner. Well, I actually want those to start from 10 down here and go up to 80, and 10 here and go out to 80. So I'm just going to change that myself. Right now, I'm going to say 10, 20, 30, and so on. And this is just because I work from the bottom up. Oh gosh, that would be 0. That would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 on the top, 10, 20, 30, 50, 60, 70, and 80. That's because I'm going to start in this stitch here and work along this direction. And then when I get to row 2, I'm going to work back this way. Row 3, I'm going to work this way. Row 4, I'm going to work the other way. So I know which direction I'm going. But for now, I need to create my foundation. And this is where I can actually start crocheting my project. So just like in the part that I did before this, where I didn't film this part, but this is what the front panel looks like here. And I'm creating the back panel now with this part that says Chrissy Wake Up. And so this is 80 by 80, this is 80 by 80 as well. In order to do this, I'm going to have to start with a chain of 80 plus 1. Because I want 80 stitches, I need the plus 1 to get my turning chain so I can work my first row of stitches. And that will start us on the first row, and then we can work from there. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to work single crochets from here for 12, 10, 11, 12, 13 rows. And on my 13th row, I'm going to start with the black yarn, and I'll show you how to do that color change when we get there. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and do single crochets, 13 rows, 80 stitches wide. And then we'll actually do the color work part, and that's where the fun part is, of turning this into an actual finished product.
I've now got my yarn and I'm going to make a slip knot here, and I do that just the standard way, wrapping one yarn piece over the other. And now I'm going to be doing my chains. So I wrap the yarn over my hook and pull it through the loop that's already on my hook. I'm going to do this 40 times and then add a stitch marker for myself so that instead of counting 80 stitches at the end, I can just count the last 40, and then I know that my work is the correct length. I do these stitch markers either every 10, 20, 40 stitches, depending on what I'm making, just so I can keep track of my work. And if I have a very large project, I don't have to count all of those stitches to make sure that I'm on the right track. So once I've got those 40 stitches, I will search frantically for my stitch marker, which I have misplaced. Then I will find it and insert it into that loop that I had just made on my hook and continue with the next 40 stitches. And then once we reach that, we can do our single crochets. Now that I have 81 chains here, I can start working my single crochets back the other way. So I'm going to do my last chain one here. So now I've got 81, and I'm going to insert my hook into the second back bump from my hook, and then pull up a loop and pull up a loop and make a single crochet. So insert the hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over again and pull through to make a single crochet. And I'm being sure to work in the back loop so that I get those nice little V stitches on the bottom, as opposed to working in the side loop of a chain, which is pretty standard. I'm working in the back loop, and I think it just makes a nicer foundation here. So that's what I'm going to do all the way across, and then we're ready to turn back the other way and continue with those 13 rows of white single crochets before we reach the actual image and do the color work that we are so looking forward to doing.
We are now at the part where I'm going to show you how to do the color change. There is a different method for the color change on the front side versus the back side of the garment, or the right side versus the wrong side. But first, I'm going to go ahead and use a straight edge that I've got here. It's just a ruler, and I like to just highlight that first row of stitches that I'm going to be doing. And I am going from right to left on the front side of the garment and left to right on the back side. And I can see here that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 white stitches and then 3 black stitches. So that's what I've done. I've got 5, so I'm going to make 3 more here in white. 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to begin the 8th stitch, but I'm not going to pull through just yet. I'm going to set that down for a second. I'm going to go ahead and grab my black yarn. Now I have the end of my black yarn, and I'm going to go ahead and bring this into my work. Now I don't make a slip knot or anything. I'm just going to pull this in because I know I'm going to weave in the tail. All right, so what I'm going to do is, instead of pulling the white yarn, right, I would yarn over and pull the white through if I were to do just a regular stitch. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to continue with my half completed stitch, grab the tail of my black yarn, and then pull this through to complete the white stitch. Now what's important here is I'm going to go ahead and do my first stitch in the black. Next, I'm going to flip my work over, and I've got my two tails here. One is the tail end of my black yarn, and the other is the working end of my white yarn. I'm going to catch both of those in this next black stitch that I'm going to do. So I've got my working yarn, my black working yarn, in my hand. I'm going to insert my hook, and I'm going to make sure that these two tails are behind my work so that when I yarn over, I'm going to catch those in my next single crochet. Then I'm going to leave them out, and I'm going to do my third stitch in the black, but remember I only have 3 black stitches, so what I'm going to have to do now, I'm going to not complete that stitch yet. I've got 2 loops on the hook. I'm going to find that white yarn and then pull this through to finish the stitch. And the reason we do this is because every stitch, you see this top part here, that came from the yarn we pulled through from the stitch before that. So if I were to do my color change, I'll show you what this looks like. If I were to finish the stitch and then do my color change, right, let's say that we finish the black one. Okay, now I'm going to do a color change. Well, I mean, like, where am I putting the yarn? I can pull it through here, and then I can start the stitch, but that gives me an extra loop, and I don't want that on the front side. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. I know it's a bit hard to see with the black yarn, but sorry, I'm using black yarn in my project. Okay, so complete half that stitch, pull the white yarn through. Okay, now this first stitch, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in white. The first one, I'm just going to do a regular single crochet. The second, I'm going to take that black yarn and hold it so that I'm also putting my hook underneath that yarn and then making a stitch, and then I'll leave it out. And so this is called floating the yarn, and I'll do this every 2 to 3 stitches. So I'll take it in the back and complete my stitch here, and that's just floating and catching the yarn on the back side, which is what we want to have happen. Now I'm going to switch again to the black yarn. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm on my 6th stitch, and this is what we do for the entire process on the front side. We're going to switch between the white and the black yarns. I see that I've got 3 in the black, and then I'll come back to working the white. There we go. And so the method that I'm using is called, it's a mix of Intarsia Crochet, because I have started the color in the middle of my work, but it's also a mix of stranded color work because I'm actually bringing the strand along with me. Now, if you look at my completed one here, it's part Intarsia because here and here were different strings of black that I've carried. Same with the red here and the yellow. That's all separate from the reds and the blacks and the yellows that I use over here. And it's stranded color work because instead of starting white here and here and here, it's all the same white. I've just worked it in a clump and then pulled it from the other parts. So the white gets carried along the whole thing, and then I bring in different colors as I'm using them. So that's the method that we are using today. It is a mixture of methods. If you prefer Intarsia or tapestry, I mean, you can do that as well. That's just not what I'm doing. Okay, so now we've got 4 in white, and I like to catch the yarn in the back every 2 to 3 stitches. That's also your own preference. You can do however many catches that you want with the yarns. I think it looks best when you go every 2 to 3 stitches. Any more than that, if you were catching all of the stitches, you would be doing tapestry crochet. And the reason that I'm not doing tapestry crochet is that when you're working the yarn underneath like this the whole way, sure, it looks fine if you're doing the black with the white, but if I were to do my color change here and have the white on top of the black and just carry the tail for the whole thing like this, I'm not floating it in the back, then when you're looking at the work, sometimes you can see that black yarn through the piece, and it's a lot more prevalent than where I was just floating the yarn in the back. So that's why I float the yarn instead of do the tapestry method where I carry the yarn for the entire thing. Okay, so I'm going to finish going all the way across the front here, and then when I reach the next row, I will bring you back because working color work on the wrong side of the fabric is different than on the right side of the fabric. All right, I've just finished working that first row of color work, which is the 14th row of my pattern here. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside for now because we're going to take a look at what's going on here. This is the front side of my pattern, and we just got to the end. And if you notice, my yarns are quite tangled over here. Well, more twisted than they are tangled, but that just happens when you're pulling through yarns and you're switching so many times like this. Super easy to fix. I usually take out my crochet hook, and I'm going to go ahead and add a stitch marker just so I don't lose this loop. And that's a really good way to make sure that my work doesn't come undone. And you could either take your skeins of yarn and untwist them, or you could take your work and start twisting your work like so. And this is going to get rid of the twists in my yarn. Okay. Did I over twist? No, not yet. There we go. Now I've got those two separated. Okay, front of our work, perfect. And now we're ready to move on to the back of our work. When we take a look at our chart here, I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in a bit. By zoom in, I'm just bringing my tripod down. Okay, let's take a look at the second row. Now here I can see, instead of counting these stitches, I actually base my color work off of where these stitches are in relation to the ones on the row below. And we have to remember, for the back side, the second row of our color work, we need to flip our work to the back, and we're not working right to left, because if I worked right to left, that would like skew the pattern every other direction that we're going. I could cut the yarn, start from the left every single time and crochet this way, but that leaves a lot of ends, and I hate weaving in ends, so we're not going to do that. When we flip to the back, we just have to remember that we start from the left and we work right. So I'm going to go ahead and insert my crochet hook again here. Now I know it is usual when you're doing single crochets to chain one and then turn. I, however, don't like that. I think it looks a lot nicer when you actually don't chain one on the sides I just pull up my loop a little extra, and then I flip my work like so, and then I'll go ahead and start crocheting. Now you'll notice that the back side looks a little different than the front side, and what I'm actually going to do that'll make it a lot easier, I'm going to take my balls of yarn and I'm going to put them closer to me on the table. And the reason I'm doing this is because when I'm working on the back side, as opposed to having my yarn far away from me, I want it close to me because I like to hold my work like this, and I need to make sure that these tails are actually going to stay on the side that's facing me. I'm not going to throw them to the back because that's actually the front. So I'm going to keep them on the wrong side. I'm going to keep them close to me for this second row. Okay, now we're ready to go ahead and do this. I can see that I've got a black stitch that is offset 1 closer to the edge of my work. So let's go ahead and crochet up until that point. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 stitches. Now I'm going to make sure that this working yarn I bring here, okay, to the wrong side of my work, which is facing me. I'm going to hold that with my thumb. I'm going to grab the working yarn in my color change and pull this through my stitch. Then I'm going to pull that white yarn tight so I maintain that stitch, because sometimes it gets a little bit loose. And then if we can see that next white stitch, that little V right here, that's where I'm going to place this first stitch. And then I've got 2 more to make. I am going to float the white yarn, so I'm going to make sure that my hook goes under both the white yarn and the black yarn. Single crochet, leave it out for my next stitch, and single crochet, but this is the point where I need to go ahead and bring in my white yarn. So I will go ahead and do that. Make sure my black yarn is in the back, bring through my white, hold on to that black yarn, and then we're going to do 2 stitches in white. Typically when I have 2 stitches, I won't do a float. I'll just bring that yarn in. All right, and we've got 1. I can see that I've got 3 stitches in the black, so I am going to float the yarn on the second stitch. And then we've got the 3rd stitch. Not going to complete that. I will go ahead and pull my white yarn through, all the way through. Make sure that black is tucked in the back. And then I've got 3 to complete in my white. So I'm going to do that. Now, I do already have a float from the previous row on this middle stitch. That's okay. I'm going to go ahead and float again on the middle stitch. And then on the 3rd stitch, I will bring the black through. And then we've got 3 in black. 1, 2, and 3. Not going to finish that one, and pull through the white. And so that's the difference of working the front versus working the back, is that when you're working the front, that working yarn stays on the wrong side which is not facing you. When you're working on the wrong side, it is facing you, so you got to make sure that yarn is closer to you. Okay, I was talking. I forgot where I was. Let's do the color change. Okay, then I've got 2 in white. 1, make sure that's pulled tight, and 2, and then we've got our color change in black. One, two, three. Color change over to the white. And this is the process. It takes a long time, but once you're used to floating the yarns and doing these color changes and things like that, it gets to be a little bit easier, and you can start kind of telling how the pattern is. Like, I know that there's going to be a lot of places where I have groups of 3 black and then 2 white and then 3 more black and 2 white and 3 more black and 2 white. And so you kind of get used to that. And then on the sides, you just count again how many stitches you have, and then you can always just double check your work and things like that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do one more stitch here, and I will show you what this looks like. If we flip it over, you can see that we have got all of our stitches being worked, and this is part of the W, A, K, E, and then we've got the U and the P and the exclamation mark over on this side. So eventually we'll be writing the words wake up. Then we'll take some time in the middle with just the white yarn, and then we'll write Chrissy, and then we'll take some time with the white yarn at the top again. And that's how to do the color work. That's how I do the color work. Eventually it gets easier, but it is time intensive. It's a special skill to develop, so don't be hard on yourself if you have to try this multiple times. I mean, I haven't got to the place with color work that I am now by just doing it once. I've done it multiple times, and it does take some dedication, some learning. And if my video is not good enough for you to go ahead and learn, I do recommend other videos. I mean, people learn differently. Maybe I haven't explained it quite the right way, but just go ahead and look up things like Intarsia Crochet, Tapestry Crochet, see which one best suits your style, which one you enjoy doing more, and decide that method, because you can do any kind of color work method with a graph like this. You don't have to do my method. This is just the blend of styles that I think suits me best in the way that I like to work the yarn. I have spent quite a long time finishing up the color work part of this pattern, and I'm just now on the plain white single crochet section, so it's taking me a long time, but here it is. It says Chrissy wake up, and I just wanted to give you a couple measurements of the pattern. So across, I can see that I am at about 20.5. When I block this, I think I'll reach 21 inches. And right now I'm at 14 inches in height. When this is done, it'll be about 20 inches in height. And that is the back panel of the Hellfire crochet pattern that I'm working on. Now, for the actual sweater pattern, I am making some adjustments to the actual shape of the panels, so do stick around for the actual pattern, because I'm creating some decreases and some armhole areas and things like that. So there's a little bit extra that goes into making that. But if you just want the graph, it is available on my coffee shop. I'll leave a link in the description for you there. And then here is the backside. So when you wear this, you'll know that none of this is gonna, get caught in your clothing that you're wearing. And I think the back honestly looks really cool. The front looks cool too, but I just love these color changes and the floats that the yarn makes. So I had one section of black yarn here, one section here. I've used about half, I would say, of the yarn bee must be merino. There is 153 yards, 140 meters. So I've used about 70 meters of black yarn, and I'm already on my second ball of the white, and I think it's going to take 2 entire balls of white yarn to do the panel. So that's 280 yards of the white yarn. I really hope you enjoyed making this panel with me. Here is the front and here's what it looks like from the back. I think this will make a really cool back panel sweater. And here is the front panel. So you see that I'm not actually doing the full square here. It is tapered in, and I'll have all of those measurements that you'll need to know for the actual sweater that I'm making in the pattern. So this is the front. Here's the back side of the front, which looks also really cool using the Intarsia and floating color work method. So I hope you enjoyed sticking around with me for this tutorial. Hope you learned something. If you want to stick around for all of the other content that I am creating for you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like this video, it really helps me out, and stick around in the future. Hope you enjoy crocheting and all this fun stuff, and have a good day.